Good morning. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday brunch stream. My name is RuneMeisterKris, and today we are going to be ranking the 7 ancient wonders of the world on a tier list. Oh, I don't have any music. It's just like silence and my voice. Let me pull up some tunes.
Don't call me Junior. I'll kill you right now. I came here to save you. This never works this way.
Good morning, and hopefully all of you are ready to go with the Sunday Archaeology brunch stream. I'm RuneMeisterKris. As I said, you guys are hopefully hungry and raring to go. Today, we are going to be having mimosas, eggs, turkey bacon, and chocolate chip waffles made by my wife, Brichella. Plus coffee. Of course. Sweet, sweet coffee. So this is what we're going to be dealing with today. We've got our tier list, our 7 ancient wonders of the world, and we're going to eat some brunch and figure out which one is the best of the best and the worst of the best. So let's get down to it. We have here the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and for those who are unfamiliar, they include the Colossus of Rhodes, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Great Pyramid at Giza, the statue to Zeus, the Lighthouse and Library at Alexandria, the Temple of Halicarnassus, and the Temple of Artemis. Mausoleum, I said what did I say, a crypt or a temple at Halicarnassus? Yeah, it's a mausoleum. That was my fault. The source that we're going to be using today is not Wikipedia, because my wife gave me so much crap for using Wikipedia the last time we used a tier list. So today we are going to be looking from World History Encyclopedia, ancient.eu. Article by Joshua J. Mark. You're welcome, Brichella. Anything, and this is what I said last time when we did a tier list of ancient temples. No, nothing that I do on these lists is indicative of the cultures from which they come from. You know, like if I put something in some place, it's not because I think that culture is particularly worse or better than any other one. It's just I'm looking at this thing subjectively or whatever, and I'm saying I think that's really cool. I would like to see that. If I was in the ancient world and I wanted to go see a themata, I would go see that themata. So let's see what we've got. Let's start learning about these. So the first one that we are looking at on this list is the Colossus of Rhodes. So let's scroll down. So the Colossus of Rhodes, I think everyone is pretty familiar with. Statue to the god Helios, who was both the patron god of the island of Rhodes, as well as being a sun god, the god of the sun. Now, the Colossus of Rhodes was a massive statue. It stood over 110 feet high and was constructed between 292 and 280 BCE. Just a reminder that the 280 is closer to us because we're dealing in BC. So it's going backwards at that point. So the bigger the number. No, I guess the bigger the number, the farther away, as opposed to in the modern area where the bigger the number, the closer to us it is. They built the statue to overlook the harbor that led into the island of Rhodes. And yeah, as it says here, despite fanciful depictions to the contrary, it stood with its legs together on a base, much like the Statue of Liberty. So a lot of people really like, and I think actually this picture has it. Yeah, this picture has it. It's kind of hard to tell. He's straddling the harbor, and the ships would sail between the legs to get into the thing. But regardless, the point is, he was on a base on one side of the harbor. He was more like a Statue of Liberty rather than like an arch. The statue was commissioned after the defeat of the invading army of Demetrius in 304 BC. Music takes over. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for telling me. It is really loud? Okay, good. Yeah, I toned it down. Getting the sound balance has been such a pain in the butt, and the songs all come through different. All right, good. So that's a little bit, that's definitely better. I appreciate you. Let's see what else we got. Oh my god, people from Rhodes are called Rhodians. Like in Star Wars, they have Rhodians. Guys, the statue had a short run. It was very, very, very awesome, very huge, very imposing. But only stood for 56 years before it was destroyed by an earthquake in 226, which is a shame. It lay in impressive ruin for over 800 years and was still a tourist attraction. I don't know why they never put it back together in 800 years. Pliny the Elder, a very famous Greek scholar and philosopher, claims that the fingers of the Colossus were larger than most statues of their day. And according to the historian Theophanes, the bronze ruins were eventually sold to a Jewish merchant of Edessa around 654 CE, who carried them away on 900 camels to be melted down. That was a fat haul. I bet he paid good money for all that. That's a lot of bronze. So that's pretty cool. I mean, straight up, I am a sucker for really, really big really big displays. The Colossus of Rhodes is definitely dope. I think that it was definitely really cool, but it collapsed pretty easily, right? Well, I shouldn't say pretty easily. That was probably a decent strong earthquake. But it's a pretty good statue, and it's unique. It's kind of it's like a more unique, interesting thing. I think I would put it. I mean, I'm thinking low A, high B. So I'll put it at the. Huh? Yeah, I'll put it at the B level right now, and we'll see later if I want to jump it up to an A based on how the others do. Next up is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. This is going to be a spicy hot take. I don't know why this is an ancient wonder. I have no idea why the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were considered an ancient wonder. They were built by Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II, who is my second. Nebuchadnezzar II is my favorite Babylonian ruler next to Nebuchadnezzar I, because that name, Nebuchadnezzar, is unbelievable. I actually had considered, when I was in high school, I had considered naming Blue Eyes White Dragon, having Nebuchadnezzar as his middle name. I know I didn't even bring it up to you because there was no way on earth that I was going to be able to. There was no way on earth I was going to be able to get Nebuchadnezzar past my wife. So this is the reason why I have the problem with the Hanging Gardens of Babylon being on this list. This clause right here. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, if they existed as described, we don't actually know if they were there. We don't know if it was a real thing or if it was just a bunch of exaggerated descriptions of really pretty parts of Babylon. Quick fact on the statue, you asked why they didn't rebuild it. They decided not to because the oracle at Delphi suggested that its destruction meant they had angered Helios by building it in the first place. Dude, that's a great fun fact. Thank you, Steely Bones. That is, I'm 100% willing to believe that. Just without, I totally trust you on that. That's a great, because that totally sounds like something that would have been the case back then. So, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were made between 605 and 562 BC by Nebuchadnezzar as a gift to his wife. They're described by the ancient writer Diodorus Siculus as being self-watering plains of exotic flora and fauna, reaching a height of over 75 feet through a series of climbing terraces. So this is the picture that I used. And this is kind of the implication that they have. I mean, in this context, yeah, it's a little bit more plausible. I didn't say it's not doable. I'm just saying that we don't know if it actually existed. That's the Tower of Babel in the background there. So here we go. As far as the historical significance, it is unclear whether the Hanging Gardens were an actual construction or a poetic creation, owing to the lack of documentation in contemporaneous Babylonian sources. So this picture here shows, this is a bas relief, which shows obviously a garden, and it's watered by an aqueduct. You can tell because of the arches and stuff like that, and the water that kind of flows through. So that's probably what they mean by self-watering garden. These hanging gardens were supposedly created for Nebuchadnezzar's wife, Amtis of Medea, and she missed the mountains and flowers of her homeland so much that the king commanded that a mountain be created for her in Babylon. And the controversy over whether the gardens existed comes from the fact that they are nowhere mentioned in Babylonian history, and that Herodotus, the Greek father of history, makes no mention of them in his descriptions of Babylon. That seems sus. That is a lot of work, but to be fair, he wouldn't have lifted a single finger. He would have lifted one finger to go, hey, let's get that done. That would have been it. He would have lifted a single finger. Hey, Mr. Contractor? Yeah, let's, just have you guys build a mountain. That's the extent of his contribution there. But, yeah, that's a little weird that Herodotus does not mention it. Although, to be fair, yeah, as this points out, there are plenty of places that Herodotus does not mention or has been wrong about. Diodorus, Philo, and the historian Strabo all claim that the gardens did exist, and that they were destroyed by an earthquake sometime after the 1st century CE. Hanging Gardens, this is going to be a spicy hot take. I'm giving it a D. I'm giving it a D on the context that it may not have existed. Also, it's just a garden. I know. I mean, yeah, I can appreciate that gardens can be very pretty. I think that gardens in context with other stuff are better. Okay, I won't knock all gardens on the basis of this one garden's potential or ranking. I'm going to give it a D, and if we need to jump it up later, we will. But I think I'm going to be pretty fair in giving it a D. Pyramid of Giza, I'm just going to drop it at S because I know it's an S tier monument. I mean, the fact that it is the only ancient monument, the ancient wonder of the world that is still standing, immediately sets it apart from everyone else, both in terms of its quality. I mean, granted, I don't think Egypt is plagued with as many earthquakes because so far 2 out of 3 of our ones have been killed by an earthquake. But I mean, I don't think I'm alone if I'm saying, hey, I'm going to put Pyramids of Giza at S tier, and I don't think anyone is going to say, I don't know about that. I mean, granted, from the outside, it's not that impressive, but what you need to consider is that it looked way different in its heyday. The ancient pyramids at Giza have been pillared or pillaged. I think I mixed pillaged and plundered, and I got pillared. But it was pillaged of most of its most striking details. The exterior level of the pyramids, which you don't see anymore, was actually a very finely polished limestone. So it would have shone and gleamed like a beacon, especially in the desert with the sun shining down on it and the wide, flat, open spaces. You would have seen the pyramids from like halfway up the Nile. That's an exaggeration, but you would have seen them from a long ass way away. I'm gonna get to work on these chocolate chip waffles. I'm very excited. So, the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed between 2584 and 2561 BC, which, for those of you keeping track, is old as balls. It's got 2,000 years on the other things on this list. It has a solid 2,000 years on the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, assuming they were a thing. Like, that alone... Like, the fact that it existed for 2,000 years, and then these other things came and went, and they are still standing now, is unbelievable. The Great Pyramid at Giza specifically was built for the pharaoh Khufu, also called Cheops in Greek, or Chops. It was the tallest man-made structure in the world for almost 4,000 years. So yeah, the actual excavations of the interior of the pyramid didn't kick off in earnest until the late 18th, early 19th centuries. Which the interior is pretty intricate. I mean, there's a lot of modern, there's a lot of like mazes to it. It's so intriguing that modern people were unknown. Which so intrigued modern people were unknown to the ancient writers. Right. Because that's the thing. A lot of people back then, like in ye olden times, who talked about the Great Pyramid of Giza, did not know anything about the interior because they were still sealed. It was the structure itself with its perfect symmetry and imposing height which impressed ancient visitors. Which is not surprising in the slightest, because it was certainly impressive to us nowadays. That's why people continue to do it. So there's absolutely no reason why the Great Pyramid of Giza is not S tier. Next up on the list, because we got to chug along, because I don't know when my kid's going to wake up, so I want to make sure that I get this done before then. The statue of Zeus at Olympia in Greece. which is a very impressive. You can see the scale here. You can see here the scale of the statue of Zeus compared to the people. It's pretty sick. It's definitely imposing. This is like for any fans of Disney's Hercules. This is essentially like what we're talking about here. That statue that he talks to in the movie, where he goes and talks to Zeus, I'm pretty sure is meant to be the same statue. It's meant to be the statue of Zeus. So the statue of Zeus at Olympia was created by the Greek sculptor Phidias, known as the finest sculptor of the ancient world in the 5th century BCE. So a little bit younger than the Hanging Gardens, a bit younger than the Temple of Giza, and a little bit younger than the Colossus. Oh, no, older than the Colossus of Rhodes. This sculpture also, he was the same guy who worked on the Parthenon and the statue to Athena in Athens. But regardless, the statue of Zeus depicted the god seated on his throne, his skin of ivory and his robes of hammered gold. So they literally just made a giant ivory statue to Zeus with hammered gold clothes. He was 40 feet tall. That is incredibly impressive. That is such a pricey makeup of what he's got going on. And it would, like, the amount of skill, like, obviously if this guy is known as the greatest sculptor of the ancient world, there's no cap on that. If he was able to create something like this, as well as working on the Parthenon and the statue of Athena and stuff, he's absolutely living up to the reputation. Designed to inspire awe in the worshippers who came to the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, I don't think he had any problem with that. Oh, never mind, I lied. Not everyone was awestruck by the statue. Literally the next sentence. Nah. Strabo reports, although the temple itself is very large, the sculptor is criticized for not having appreciated the correct proportions. He has shown Zeus seated, but with the head almost touching the ceiling, so that we have the impression that if Zeus moved to stand, he would unroof the temple. I think that's a crappy take. I don't know what the opposite of spicy hot take is. I guess it would be like mild cold take. I think that's a very mild cold take. If anyone knows anything about art, you have to alter the proportions of a being in order to adjust it to the audience, right? So here's the deal. If you're coming in and you're looking at the statue of Zeus, of course his proportions are going to be all wonky because you're going to be looking at him from the ground. So if you're looking at him from the ground, for those of you who have a TikTok, right? I've been pretty big on TikTok, which, by the way, everyone should go follow me on TikTok. There's this trend going around where people hold their camera down at their feet and they stick their arms above their head to make them look like they have baby arms. Because as the perspective is, they're going to be smaller the farther away they are. So if you're going to have a statue of Zeus here, and you're going to need to have bigger proportions on the upper end. Like, yeah, it's got to look like he's going to be nearly touching the ceiling. A, because you want him to feel like he's filling up the entire room because he is a literal god. And B, because for these clowns down here who are looking at him from like a lower vantage point, they're going to need to see a bigger portion on top to make it look even, so that it looks like an actual person and doesn't look comical. That's Art 101. So absolutely, there is no, like, this mindset of, well, his proportions are off and it looks like he's about to scrape the top of the roof. That's a mild cold take, in my opinion. That's somebody who's looking to criticize something. That's something where Strabo had a personal problem with Phidias, in my opinion. So the Temple of Olympia with Zeus finally fell into ruin after the rise of Christianity and the ban on the Olympic Games as pagan rites. Yeah, there was a dark period for the Olympics where it was considered to be a pagan ritual, because the Olympics were always, obviously with the name Olympic versus Olympian and everything related to Olympus, they were considered to be like a ritual performance act towards the old gods. So in an effort to kind of push the monotheistic Christianity, they ended up banning the Olympic Games for a period of time, until they were eventually brought back, because everybody's like, look, it's just sports. The statue was eventually carried off to Constantinople, where it was later destroyed sometime in either the 5th or 6th centuries by an earthquake. Again with the earthquakes. Statue of Zeus, I will say, given the fact... So let's see, how long did it last? It was built in the 5th century BC and lasted until the 5th century CE. So that's about 1,000 years. So it lasted longer than the Colossus of Rhodes. Granted, it was inside mostly. It had gold clothes, ivory body. I would say I'm going to put the statue of Zeus above the Colossus of Rhodes. I'm going to put the statue of Zeus above the Colossus of Rhodes, just purely because of A, the quality of the material, B, the longevity, like it lasted longer. I think that's a safe bet. So next up is the Library of Alexandria. The Lighthouse of Alexandria. Important distinction. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was built on the island of Pharos. It stood close to 440 feet tall. The Colossus of Rhodes was 110 feet tall. So that was 110 feet tall. Picture something 4 times the size of that. 455 for the pyramid, thank you. So not quite as tall as the pyramid. Alexandria in general, as a whole place, they just had so many things going on in there, and the fact that that whole city and that whole compound has been completely lost is definitely one of the greatest tragedies in all of history. The lighthouse was commissioned by Ptolemy I Soter, which was a title. It was the 3rd tallest human-made structure in the world after the pyramids, after 2 of the pyramids. So it was Pyramid 1, Pyramid 2, and then the lighthouse at Alexandria. The Egyptians were built different. They were built different, and they built different. They had to have been doing something differently than most people. The height of these structures. And what's so funny is that it's not even like it was a standard practice. It's not like they just frequently built just like Adobe skyscrapers in Egypt on the reg. You know, they had their wattle and daub and their stone and their standard size cities, right? Which were about as architecturally complicated as a lot of other places in contemporary time, maybe a little bit ahead of their time, just sheerly because of how old Egyptian culture was. And then they had these ridiculous structures that were 400 something feet tall. The lighthouse itself was a mirror which reflected the sun's rays by day and a fire by night, could be seen as far as 35 miles out to sea. The structure rose from a square base to a middle octagonal section and up to a circular top, and those who saw it in its glory reported that words were inadequate to describe its beauty, which is pretty high praise. The lighthouse was badly damaged by, oh, surprise, surprise, an earthquake in 956 CE, and then again in 1303 CE and 1323 CE. By the year 1480 CE, it was gone. This thing just tanked earthquakes. That's what I'm getting from this. It had 1, 2, 3, potentially 4 earthquakes before it finally was just like, I give up. It was like it just took earthquakes to the face and was like, no, I'm gonna keep going. I'm a little rough, but I'm gonna keep going. The Egyptian fort Quait Bay now stands on the site of Pharos, built with some of the stones from the ruin of the lighthouse. Let's see. So here, time frame wise, it's also very long. So 1480 and 280. So 1,700 something years is a really impressive run, and more so than some of the other places. Oh, this lighthouse's interpretation is from Ubisoft. This must have been for Assassin's Creed Origins. This must be for Origins, which I never played. I should play that. I might add those earlier Assassin's Creed games to my repertoire of games to play eventually. The tower had longevity, 1,700 plus years. Utility, in the form of its actual lighthouse function. Beauty. Uniqueness, being the 3rd tallest, well, somewhat unique, being the 3rd tallest. I can't put it at S tier. I can't put it at S tier because it doesn't compete with the pyramid. But I think I can definitely keep it in an A tier. I mean, for me, it's a straight A. It's just a solid A tier. Both of these were described as having like inspired wonder in people, right? I think A tier is a very fair placement. Okay. Next up is the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. So this one is probably a more sleeper. I feel like people aren't going to be as familiar with this one compared to all of the other ones. The Mausoleum at Halicarnassus was the tomb of the Persian satrap Mausolus. Oh, I wonder, and I don't think I have to wonder very hard, if the etymology of the word mausoleum comes from this gentleman, Mausolus. Considering this is an ancient wonder of the world, I would not be surprised if this is how the word got its name. Yeah, here we go. So late 15th century via Latin from Greek mausoleon, from mausolos, the name of a king of Caria. 4th century BC, to whose tomb in Halicarnassus the name was originally applied. That is awesome. I learned something today. And if I learned something today, I'm hoping at least one of you guys learned something today. That's why we do these archaeology streams, to learn crap. We've got the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the tomb to the Persian satrap Mausolus, built in 351 BC. Mausolus chose Halicarnassus as his capital city, so it makes sense that his mausoleum would be there. And he and his beloved wife, Artemisia, went to great lengths to create a city whose beauty would be unmatched in the world. Mausolus died in 353 BC, and Artemisia wished to create a final resting place worthy of such a great king. She died 2 years after him, and her ashes were entombed with his in the mausoleum. Meanwhile, Greek scholar Pliny the Elder records that the craftsmen continued work on the structure after her death, both as a tribute to their patroness and knowing the work would bring them lasting fame. The first part, oh yeah, it's a tribute to her, to their patroness, is like the kind outward thing, but that they knew full well that being like the guys who made the mausoleum at Halicarnassus would give them like serious ancient clout. Pliny the Elder records also that the tomb was 135 feet tall, so reasonable height, taller than the Colossus of Rhodes, and ornately decorated with fine sculptures. It was destroyed by a series of earthquakes. Again with the earthquakes! And lay in ruins for 100 years until in 1494 CE it was completely dismantled and used by the Knights of St. John of Malta in the building of their castle at Bodrum, where the ancient stones can still be seen today. The tomb did survive Alexander the Great invading the city, and also when pirates attacked multiple times after that. Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that wasn't a priority for those people when they came in. Like, they're not looking to kind of dunk on some guy's mausoleum. They're looking to try and get the riches out. I mean, the sculptures were beautiful, and that was probably a point of wealth and contention, but especially for people like Alexander the Great, when they were coming into these places, they wanted to absorb these areas into their empire, right? And so why would you knock out the things that make these places so great? That's the reason why you're coming there, is because you want them to be part of your empire. So you're not going to go in and you're not going to destroy a lot of the cultural strongholds, because that's exactly the sort of stuff that you're trying to bring under your own umbrella. At least that's in my opinion. The pirates, meanwhile, they were just more interested in the shinies. The structure itself is, you know, impressive. It's big, it's strong, it's a box. It's going to hold up to time, you know? Here's the ruins of the mausoleum right now, still in the city of Halicarnassus in the modern time. That's really cool. As an archaeologist, I would love to go there. I think that would be so fun and cool to kind of like poke my nose around this place. I mean, the fact is the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, yeah, it's an impressive structure, but ultimately it doesn't really inspire that much in me. I'm thinking C tier. You know what? I could be convinced to go B tier. If that's the case, I'm putting the priority towards the letter, so that's why I'm dragging the the lighthouse above the statue of Zeus, because I think the lighthouse is more impressive than Zeus. So let's do the last one here, which is the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Or Ephesos, however you want to pronounce it. My Greek is really, it's canon that I can't pronounce anything. I can't pronounce Greek words. I can't pronounce Norse words. I studied Old Norse. I can't pronounce it for squat. I'm no good at pronunciation. I can't even pronounce English half the time. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, which was a Greek colony in Asia Minor, took over 120 years to build and only one night to destroy. Okay, that's a bad start. Completed in 550 BCE, the temple was 425 feet long, 225 feet wide, and had 127 60-foot high columns. So there's 127 columns going around this, and they're each 60 feet high. Sponsored by the wealthy King Croesus of Lydia, he spared no expense in anything that he did, according to Herodotus, among others. The temple was so magnificent that every account written has the same tone of awe and agrees that it was the most amazing structures ever raised by humans. I'm calling cap. I think that's a cap. But that's just me personally. I didn't see it. I can't attest. So here's the issue. On July 21st, 356 BC, a man named Herostratus set fire to the temple in order, as he said, to achieve lasting fame by forever being associated with the destruction of something so beautiful. Incredibly troll reason. That is effed up. That is effed up. Some dude straight up committed arson with the sole intent of perpetuating his own infamy? The Ephesians decreed that his name should never be recorded nor remembered. Obviously, that didn't work. That is intense Fight Club. That is very big Fight Club vibes. So this clown, Herostratus, decided that he wanted to set the fire to this temple, burn the entire thing down in a night. The Ephesians decreed that his name should never be recorded nor remembered. Drawn and quartered is right, Viper. Yeah, not a suitable thing, I'm sure. Meanwhile, Stratos set the name down as a point of interest in the history of the temple. Yeah, I know. Ironically, that's something that I've noticed throughout history. If a culture has decided that somebody's name needs to be stricken from the record and never remembered, that is the surefire way to get somebody's name uncovered and remembered for all of eternity. The best side example of this is the pharaoh Akhenaten from Egypt. Akhenaten, this is a very brief, I'm going to do a brief summary of this. Akhenaten is one of my favorite pharaohs of Egypt because basically what happened was he became pharaoh and decided that after 3,000 years of Egyptian history that he wanted Egypt to be monotheistic. And he was like, guys, guess what? Ra, Horus, Set, Isis, all the gods that we know and love over the last 3,000 years or 2,000 years, however long, I don't know, I don't recall the exact date that he was pharaoh. But over the course of all this time, they aren't real anymore. Just kidding. They aren't a thing. I am the representative of the one true god, Akhenaten, the sun god. Or Aten, the sun god. I am Akhenaten, like the son of Aten. And you guys should all worship me as that god. That's what we're going to do. So he ended up trying to go around and turn Egypt monotheistic. And the Egyptians were like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then he died and everyone got together. And even his kid who assumed the throne after him, like they all sat down in a room. They were like, okay, we're all just going to agree that was freaking weird, right? And they basically just went around and they just carved all of his cartouches out of the temples. They just chiseled them out of the walls. And they decided, all right, nobody's ever going to talk about that weird period of our history again. Like, we're just going to agree that we were, yeah, okay, but how about no? Basically, they're like, all right, so we were all just drunk for the last 30 years, right? We're just going to ignore that. That was not a thing. And that's essentially what happened. And then guess what happened? People came around and said, who the hell was so reviled in ancient Egypt that they tried to strike all record of their name from history? Literally, his name was chiseled out of every column, every temple, every monument. They took his face off of all of his statues. They chiseled the face off of all of his statues so no one would see his likeness. They just tried to ruin that man's entire career. But so tying it back in, Herostratus, the surefire way to ensure that he was going to be remembered for all time was to try and pretend like he never existed, or to try and make sure that nobody ever heard his name. That's just kind of how humans are. We're way too curious for our own good. The same night that the temple burned, Alexander the Great was born, and then later on he offered to rebuild the ruined temple when he came into power, but the Ephesians refused the generosity. It was rebuilt on a much less grand scale after Alexander's death, but it was destroyed by the invasion of the Goths. Rebuilt again, it was finally destroyed utterly by a Christian mob led by St. John Chrysostom in 401 CE. So the temple clearly had a hard time. Guys, this is a tough one for me, because they call it the most impressive structure that was ever created by mankind, but what I'm seeing right here is literally just another Parthenon. So this is the Parthenon, right? I mean, mostly destroyed. I mean, that's the state that it's in right now. Maybe the interior was really fancy. I mean, maybe. It doesn't say anything about it in this. I mean, maybe part of it just comes from the details that we're not seeing in this. You know, they have like these crazy sculptures and everything that are in there. Like, maybe the sculptures are just so impressive that it was worth mentioning. But I have a hard time having this stand out compared to the temple, to the Parthenon. Temple of Diana. Well, Diana was another name for Artemis, if I'm not mistaken. And then, like, yeah, they had a big statue in the center behind the altar, so maybe that had something to do with it. I mean, like, yeah, it looks okay. Staircase probably had a basement level. Treasury. I mean, I'm sure, don't get me wrong, I'm sure it was a very impressive structure. Okay, so Diana, that's what I thought. Diana was the Roman version of Artemis. Diana was Roman Artemis. So yeah, looking at this, I don't see. And Steely Bones is gonna hate me. Steely Bones is gonna unfollow. He's gonna unfollow after this. Honestly, I think that it doesn't have enough uniqueness. It doesn't have enough uniqueness to me. And if you're looking at me saying, Chris, you're only putting it in C tier so that every category has at least one thing in it, like, okay, yeah, that there's a little bit of that in there, but I still think that I still think that there's a valid reason to put this only at a C tier. I'm not seeing anything that makes it stand out apart from the Parthenon or any other kind of Greek temple, other than perhaps its size. But I mean, that on top of the fact that it took 120 years for them to build it. Like, I get that these things take time, but obviously they built the Great Pyramid, the S tier, the largest structure in the entire world, in less than 120 years, if I'm not mistaken. It was like 20 years or something like that. And some guy burned it down in a night just to be a troll. I mean, granted, that's not the temple's fault, but that's what happened. They tried to rebuild it 2 or 3 times. It kept getting donked. I just realized I have this like Banjo-Kazooie music going on in the background. I have this like really upbeat, goofy music while I'm talking about an ancient temple being burned to the ground. I don't know if that's the vibe that I'm going for here. I just don't think that that's... I just don't see that as impressive as it was said to be by everyone who went and saw it. Granted, here's another thing. All of these people who are coming here talking about how great it is were Greek guys. It was just a bunch of Greek dudes who rolled in like, oh yeah, this Greek building is absolutely the most impressive building that I've ever seen in my whole life. Now, I'm not saying that they're biased in their historical, descriptions. Did you just unplug my camera? So I'm assuming everyone can still hear me. There it is. Okay, good. We're good. Hey, pal. Okay. Still, okay, yeah, I'm sure it was valid. It was very impressive and all that. But the fact is, I think that the fact that it took so long to build that it looks way too similar to every other Greek temple out there, and then it burned down in a night. I have to give it C tier on that. I feel pretty comfortable with all of these picks here. I think this is a really well-balanced, really well-established tier list. Thank you all so much for coming in, hanging out, enjoying the brunch stream, drinking coffee, eating food, doing our tier list with us. And hey, if anyone's watching this on YouTube later, because this is going to be a YouTube video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. They should be at the bottom of the screen over here, because I always mix it up and I always say it's on this side of the screen, but it's not. It's on this side. So feel free to hit subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can see more stuff coming out soon. I don't. Most of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed. They should be. So yeah, thank you so much. Wow.